Yo, what is going on, you guys? We have a brand new season starting on Tuesday, and today we're going to be going over every single card, giving my rating on its competitiveness, the flexibility, and do I think this card will get either nerfed or buffed already. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. So in case you guys did not know, these are the data mine cards we have for the brand new season starting on Tuesday, the December season, as we do have a total of 7 new Series 5 cards. Of course, Weapon X is the data mine season pass card, and Adamantium Infusion is the data mine super premium season pass card. So those, of course, are in the season pass / super premium season pass, and then we have 5 different Series 5 cards also releasing. The new season does start on December 2nd, and this season pass card is data mine to be Weapon X, which the ability I found on Marvel Snap Zone, which is going to be after one of your other cards is destroyed, +1 power. After every third time, improve this effect by 1. So if you have Weapon X on the board, I believe you have to have it on the board for this all to count, of course. So it's not like you've destroyed 3 cards already. You play Weapon X now, and then it gets +2. You have to have Weapon X on the board like Collector, right? And you destroy these cards in order to get extra beneficial value for your Weapon X. So you can get this to a 2/5, and then after it hits that 2/5, then it gets to +2. So then if you, let's say, hypothetically destroy another 3 cards, you've destroyed 6 in total. That's going to be a 2/11. I think 2/11 could be pretty good, which is why, in general, I think competitive-wise, if you can get it down, you might have some really good success with that there. But I don't necessarily know if this is a plug into regular destroy. I think you either need to play more of the token destroy list with like a Squirrel Girl and a Shanna kind of situation. You could do it in like a Deadpool destroys thing, but like your turn 2, you're setting up more for Deadpool things or things you want to destroy, opposed to having a card that really just scales by itself on the board kind of situation. So kind of thinking about that makes me feel a little weird about this card. I wouldn't be surprised if they do adjust this, because this is a season pass card. So there's totally a world where they do change this up because they want to sell more season passes, right? Next, we have Adamantium Infusion, which is an on reveal, revive your highest powered destroy card here with its power doubled. This is a 4-cost skill, which seems kind of crazy. Of course, you can use this with some Nimrod things, some Black Panther things. Maybe you want to do this with some of that Firehair zombie deck as well as one of those outs. Of course, it is a targeted revive because it's your highest powered destroyed card. You don't have to fish as much as like a Phoenix Force, which revives any of the potential cards in your destroy pile. Looking at it this way, too, I do think it is fairly more flexible than the regular Season Pass card, because the regular Season Pass card pertains to having to have the card on the board and having to have multiple cards destroyed in order to get that value, whereas this, you just have to carve cards in your destroy pile that you can revive. And it being a targeted destroy, revive, and being able to double that at that turn, like in that sense, is really solid. So I think competitive-wise, like, this can add a lot of really solid potential power to the board, and because it is targeted, I think that also gives this card even more value than it would have if it was just looking at a card in your revive pile like Phoenix Force does. And this also doesn't take up board space, which is really nice too, so you can have that big card, and maybe even you want to destroy it again, or you want to use one of these other skills that we'll have later this season in order to get extra value. If they do adjust this card, maybe they would make it a 5 cost, because with skills, you can't nuke any power necessarily off it. You wouldn't be like 1.5 times, what it was originally. I think they would have to make this a 5 cost if they were to adjust it. Next, of course, we do have Chamber, which Chamber is a Series 5 card that is a 2-cost, 3-powered card. Activate, you get +2 power for each 5 cost or higher in your hand or here on the board where you have Chamber, which I think that is actually very, very interesting. I think, honestly, fairly flexible. I don't think this is just you plug into one type of deck. I think you can use this in Thanos. I think you can use it potentially in that Sasquatch, Mockingbird deck. Of course, you're not going to get as many crazy procs potentially there, right? But you could also use this potentially in Hela. Like, I think there's a bunch of different options you could do here. Even like with a Doombot landing on this lane, that counts as a 6-cost card there. Like, I think there's a lot of different enablers for this card. And because it is 5 cost or higher, you have some options there, which I really enjoy too. So I think competitive-wise, this getting +2, of course, goes to, you know, with one proc, it's a 2.5. 2, it's a 2.7. Like, I think there's a world you can get this from that 2.7 to 2.9 range, which I think is really solid, which, of course, we'll go over decks for this actually this week. And the last 2 cards we'll go over this week with our buy or bust this week. But I would not be surprised if this card is very solid, I think, this next season. If it were to get adjusted, maybe they change it to a 2.2. I don't think they want to take away potentially that +2 unless it is too much. But I think the first thing they would do if they were to adjust this would make it a 2.2. But I don't think it is in any need of adjustment right now. I think this card just is going to be pretty good. Next, we have, of course, Weapon H, which you guys know if you guys have been on the channel that I have been talking about this card a lot because I am very excited for this card as a Black Knight enjoyer. But what does this card do? It is a 7-cost, 14-power card. When this card is discarded, put this back with -2 cost. So discarded 1 time, it is a 5-cost. Discarded 2 times, it's a 3-cost. 3 times, it's a 1-cost. A 114 seems pretty good. I don't know. But yeah, I think this card has some pretty awesome potential here. I think flexibility-wise, of course, you're going to see it on Black Knight. I think you're going to see it in Hela. I think there's a world maybe you see it in some standard discard. I know it's weird because like you can't necessarily target this and Apocalypse, but if you can target this first and then it makes it so your Apocalypse always gets targeted potentially later on, it gives you some options there, and being able to play out 14 power, with the downside being it had to be discarded a little bit first to be able to get that out, I think is pretty good. But I think mainly the 2 decks you're going to see are probably going to be something more like a Black Knight and maybe Hela. But I think 14 power, with that being its downside, is really competitive. That is a very, very strong number there. Do enjoy that. I think there maybe is a world, if this is too good, that they make this even more expensive, or they decrease the cost that gets reduced when it's discarded. I don't necessarily see that being the case. Or they make it a 7-12 instead of a 7-14. Kind of like what they did with Agatha when Agatha, you know, was a 6-14 and was feeling so good in those Black Knight Redshift decks. So maybe they do that if this power is too much. But I think we're also in a very power corrupt area as well at the moment that I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of stays as is. But I want to have that kind of as a warning. I wouldn't be surprised maybe if they do something with this. But, of course, it is way too soon to tell. But it's kind of theorizing there. Next, we do have Maverick, which is a 3-cost, 3-powered activate card. Activate. Give the next card you play power equal to this card's power. Think of more of a Forge and a Galacta. This happens before the card is revealed, opposed to something like a Nico or an Agony, which is after you've played a card onto Agony, or after you play a card to give it +2 power, is like the way Nico interacts there. So this card has a lot of crazy, crazy potential here. I think this is fairly flexible, whether it is Surfer, whether it is Hand Buff, whether it is literally just trying to add power to other cards. At a 3-3, adding 3 power is something that has always been really solid as we look at something like a Galacta, as we look at something like an original Elsa, as we look at just cards that add 3 power in general, even something like a Ironheart. Ironheart, of course, can be more niche and narrow because it's a 3-3-0. And there's the downside there is you don't necessarily know what you're going to be targeting, whereas Galacta, Elsa, and now Maverick, you know what you're going to be targeting with that +3, which I think makes this fairly strong and honestly pretty flexible. I think you can use this like in a different variety of list. If you hit this also with a Surfer, right? Or with a Surge, or with a Galacta itself, like getting that extra power so you can give that extra power to another card seems very strong. So I think this card should be very solid. If they were to adjust it, maybe they would make it a 3-2, because +3, we know how that works in this game. 3-3, like a +3 always is something they have to really question, and no more often than not does kind of get adjusted. Also looking at like what happened like with Sparky recently and everything too, but I think this card's going to be very solid. Next, we have Aurora, which also is another very interesting card. I like the dynamics this season seem newer. Some are a little bit newer, some are a little bit more fresh, like we have with here the Aurora, you know, rest in peace Firestar. But 6 cost, 6 power card. On reveal, give one of your other on reveal cards at each location +2 power. Repeat for ongoing, activate, and end of turn. So this gives power to every single location. It doesn't say each other location. It is just cards other than Aurora. So you can get that +2 on an on reveal at each location, and ongoing on each location, and activate at each location, and end of turn. So this can proc up to 4 times to potentially 4 different cards at each location, or potentially the same card multiple times if they have 2 abilities. So something like a Mr. Fantastic first, or Zombie Mr. Fantastic. Sorry, Mr. Fantastic first steps at end of turn would get hit. But Zombie Mr. Fantastic has an on reveal and an activate. So there's a world where Aurora hits that twice. I think this card kind of can go crazy. Like, just adding the amount of power globally, you have so many different options you can use with this card, which is kind of crazy as well. I do think this is fairly flexible as like a end-all, be-all 6-cost card. You're playing in order to get value across the board. Kind of an enabler like Spectrum. Of course, Spectrum only hits every single ongoing card. This gives you options to hit a larger variety of cards, but you kind of got to think about how you're playing your cards out and how you want cards to get hit potentially too. Whereas Spectrum, you know it's going to hit all of your ongoing cards, where this, of course, can only maybe hit 1 ongoing card at each location. So it's kind of like Spectrum, kind of not. You kind of have to build your deck a little, definitely differently, in order to get maybe some of that maximum value with Aurora, to maybe get multiple procs on multiple locations and kind of things, because it only hits those different types of cards one time. It's not like you hit an on-reveal card and you don't have any ongoing, you don't have any activate, you have any end of turns, that's going to go and proc through that on-reveal again. So just kind of keeping that in mind. I still think, though, like, you're running a variety of different cards in these lists more often than not. I think, like, right now in Snap, you're running a different variety of cards and lists. So I think that helps give this card some extra value to make it so it's probably at least like a 6-12. I would say more often than not, you're at least hitting like 3 different cards, I would say, of the different types potentially, or even of the same types. So I think that is pretty solid there. I think there's a world it gets even higher than a 6-12. You're like at a 6-18. It really just depends on how you're building your deck and like what cards have multiple abilities and the way you're setting up your lanes to be able to, spread power and stuff. But I think competitively, I think this is going to be a fairly competitive card. If it is too much power with that +2, maybe they'd make it a +1. But of course, I'm just kind of like, if it's too strong. I think it's still in a really solid spot. I don't think it's necessarily going to be too strong. But just kind of thinking there's a world where I think of some of these other cards, this and Maverick and Weapon H would be the ones I think would get adjusted and nerfed. If there were anything, whereas something like a Weapon X might get buffed. Adamantium Infusion could potentially get nerfed too, just if it was going to happen. I'm not saying they're going to get nerfed. I'm just saying if those the cards were to be adjusted, I think those are the ones there. Whereas something like Fantomex is going to be a little bit different. It is a Series 5, 4-cost, 6-power activate. If you have had cards discarded and destroyed, afflict front row enemy cards at each location with -2. You have to discard and destroy cards in the same game in order to have this activate work. It will not work if you've only destroyed or if you have only discarded. So kind of keep that in mind. I think that makes this way more narrow. I think that at the 4-6 stat line too might be, I mean, of course the ability can be strong because you could potentially be, a 4-18 if they have 2 cards at each lane. You afflict them with -2. That's 12 power afflicted. So that's a 4-18 there. Really cool. But I think in general, you're gonna have to really hit some crazy combo curves in order to do that, or have some of these other Series 4 cards in order to get some of that extra value as well. So I'm not entirely certain how often you're going to see this down. It kind of feels like a kind of a Spider-Man Noir kind of, I need to hit this combo, I need to do this, I need to do that. But at the same time, you're not trying to get this out on turn 4 to go on reveal on turn 4. I think you play this probably closer to the end of the game. I think this is like a very end of the game kind of situation where maybe you're destroying and you're discarding cards in the final turn in order to have a huge Fantomex kind of flip then and there. So I think you can have that extra power to give that some good value. Goodness gracious. But I do think if they were to adjust this, they would give this more power, make this a 4-7 or like a 4-8. I think that would be what I would think would happen with this if they were to adjust it. But of course, I think this card's just maybe in a rough spot as, a 4-cost activate and the conditions you have to meet. As we go through our rankings here, we do have Fantomex at 7th for the brand new Series 5 cards here. I think it's looking a little bit weaker compared to some of the other stuff we have this season. Really cool concept conceptually, but I don't necessarily have it that high. I'm not very high on it. I think Weapon H2 is a little bit too niche right now for the Destroy archetype. Goodness gracious, what was that? Because I feel like there's so much more you're trying to do. I feel like you're trying to do more of the Deadpool stuff right now. and trying to kind of like set that up, opposed to maybe some of the other stuff we'll be talking about here later. I think Chamber is going to be like, strong and do what it does really well. But I think these other cards, I think I rate higher than Chamber itself. Even something like an Adamantium Infusion, reviving your highest destroyed card to this location with its power doubled, I think is really solid. And I think Nimrod Destroy is something we're going to see a lot more of this next season. And I think that gives that extra value and puts it over the top Chamber there, and definitely puts it over the top of Weapon X, because I think if you're playing that Nimrod Destroy version, you're not really setting up a lot of destroy cards in order to be able to get Weapon X value. Of course, the Deadpool version, you can do Weapon X things, but I feel like you're losing tempo with Weapon X in those decks probably. And then, of course, I do have Weapon H at third, just because these other two cards I think can potentially be crazier than Weapon H. Of course, the God Curve, getting this discarded twice, so then it is a 3-cost, 14-power card is really good. I just think these other two cards have just some value that can be a bit more flexible and add different kind of, lanes and different ideas and concepts to different decks, opposed to just being kind of more one-dimensional with discard there, which is why I do have Aurora in second, being able to hit different, types of on-reveal, end of turn, activates, and ongoing cards with +2 power, and being able to repeat that, I think is really good in order to give that extra value to this card. But I do think something like Maverick is going to be crazy. I think that +3, the flexibility there, that's +3 without Maverick getting buffed. Maverick getting buffed and then adding power to another card, I think is really where you're going to find that sweet spot with this, and be able to do just some really, really crazy things. So I'm excited to see kind of what happens there, because this is something you play potentially on more of a turn 4, a turn 5. If you play it on something like a turn 5 after a Galacta buff, that is a 6-powered you're about to give to the next card you play. Just having that seems fundamentally really strong. So I'm interested to see kind of how that plays out, and I do have that as my top card of the season. Of course, that was my top Series 5 card of the season. As we are looking at the Series 4 cards that are Dynamite, we do have potentially Wade Wilson as a limited time event, limited time mode card, potentially Marrow as a limited time event mode card, Fastball Special as a limited time mode event card, and then we have Wild Child. This is how they are data-mined when I was looking at them on Snap.fan, but these are the Series 4 cards we have potentially this season. As we do break them down, we start with Wade Wilson, which is a 2-cost, 2-powered card. When destroyed, replace. Think of Airwalker, the way it replaces. So Wade Wilson doesn't get shuffled back into your deck. It does go into your destroy pile, but then gets replaced by a card from either your hand or your deck that cost 1. A 1-cost card from your hand or deck, and that is going to be looking at their base cost. And it gets +1 power. So it's kind of like a Deadpool X23 enabler. Maybe you're using this for some Mark in the Fae things in order to get some value potentially too, which I don't hate that there. But I do think flexibility-wise, this card is kind of like the Weapon Egg. Weapon X. X? Goodness gracious, Weapon X. I was combining X and H. I don't know what that was. Kind of like Weapon X. I feel like, yes, it could add you some extra value into some of these destroy decks, but do I want to swap out some of my main destroy cards for Wade Wilson? Do I want to just kind of, no, I'm going to be getting a 1-cost now. Yes, that is helpful if I want to start, that 1-cost destroy curve, but I don't necessarily know if the list needs this in it for that kind of flexibility. I feel like it's just going to be in a very interesting spot. I feel like you probably use it in other styles of destroy though. You're using this more for maybe a Morgan Le Fay, like I said, style deck. Or you're trying to fish for a 1-drop so you can have, some Agony do things. Or maybe you're doing the whatchamacallit, the Zombies Firehair deck so you can make sure you get the Hunger down. Or you get Nico. I think there's options there for it, but I feel like it just feels a little slow, or it feels like just maybe the wrong time for the type of destroy we're playing at the moment. Of course, getting that targeted draw, or, that targeted card on the board from your hand or your deck so you don't have to play it is nice. So I think competitiveness, if you do want to play it, I think that gives it some value. It might be more of a 2.5 star than a 3-star, but we'll see how it goes. I don't know necessarily if this card gets adjusted. Maybe you make it a 1-cost, so then you can destroy it better if it doesn't perform well at a 2-cost, but we'll see what happens there. The next card we do have is going to be Wild Child, which is a Series 4 2-cost 1-powered card. Ongoing, +4 power if you have discarded a card, and then also +4 power if one of your cards has been destroyed. So there's the potential for this ongoing card to be a 2/5 or a 2/9. If you have destroyed and discarded, it's an ongoing 2. So it's something you can play out whenever in the game, and the ability will be as is. Something you could play potentially in those Fantomex decks where you're trying to discard and destroy cards. So you can have a 2/9 here with Wild Child, and then you have Fantomex in order to do things. So I think that could be pretty interesting. I think flexibility-wise, you don't necessarily have to have a destroy deck and discard deck in one, like a hybrid deck, in order to get super value from this card. Of course, you want the maximum value. You want to do both. But you could play this in a discard deck. You could play this in a destroy deck. And since it is a 2/5 with either a discard or a destroy, I think that is very solid. Some really good stats for a 2 cost, at the moment. But if you can get both down, I think that makes this hyper competitive at a 2/9. That is like the exclusive kind of stat line for a 2 cost card. Like that is really, really good. And so I think that's something that could be really crazy with this. There's a world where maybe if it's too strong, they make it a 2/0, hypothetically speaking here. But I think in general, I don't necessarily see that happening. But when it comes to some of these Series 4 cards, I think this is one of those ones higher up on the list that could potentially get one of those changes if it is too strong. That's why I would say there's a world where it gets adjusted, but I don't think off the bat for a good while until someone nails down that hybrid deck that it would get adjusted. It depends on really like how detrimental that deck is in general. But I think this card is going to be very strong. I think it's going to be very, very solid. Next, we do have Marrow, which is another Series 4 card. I think potentially is data mined as a limited time event / game mode card, which is a 2 cost, 3 powered card. When discarded or destroyed, randomly split -6 power amongst enemy cards. So, of course, if there are not a lot of enemy cards on the board, some of these cards could be hit multiple times, opposed to, like, maybe there's 6 cards on the board that get hit once. Think of kind of like the way Kahori works. Kind of something like that. Kahori, of course, splits power amongst all your cards on the board, depending on how many cards you have in hand. This is always -6 power amongst enemy cards here. I think this could be pretty crazy. This is another potentially 2/9. Of course, you do have to destroy it or discard it in order to get that value. But I think this card can be kind of crazy. I think because it can be destroyed or discarded, it makes it even a bit more flexible. I think it probably is like 2.5 stars here when it comes to flexibility, because you could use it either style of those decks. And maybe you're playing in like an Affliction discard destroy deck, kind of like what you're thinking of like with Fantomex and like with Wild Child now. Kind of feels like these 3 kind of go together, maybe like a small package or something here. I think competitive-wise, you're playing this in something like a Morgan Le Fay style deck in order to be able to proc this multiple times, because, of course, it is discarded or destroyed. I think if you can proc this twice, you revive it again with Morgan Le Fay, and then you destroy it again, this card could go like really, really crazy. But I think in general, just this going off one time is a 2/9, So I think there's a lot of really just cool options that you can do with this card, which makes this like pretty competitive, I would say. I would say it might get adjusted if they, of course, deem it too strong. Granted, I'm saying all of this, and like Human Torch has been so strong for seasons and seasons and seasons, but it's the skill ceiling. For Human Torch, they say that makes it so like Human Torch doesn't need to change. Well, what about the skill ceiling for this? What if this has a crazy skill ceiling too? If they like nerf this before they nerf something like a Human Torch, that's going to be kind of crazy to me. I think that would be just kind of wild. But I don't necessarily think this is going to get nerfed. I'm just saying this is probably one of those cards that would be more likely to get nerfed if it is too good. But I think this card's going to be great nonetheless. But this card right here, holy smokes. We got Fastball Special, a 2-cost skill, Series 4 / limited event, which is an on reveal. Destroy your highest powered card here to afflict an enemy card here with that much negative power. So whatever card of yours this destroys, an enemy card gets afflicted with that much negative power. Holy smokes, that is crazy. For a 2-cost Series 4 card, oh my goodness. It is a targeted destroy, and then it is afflicting that power to a single enemy card. It's not divvied out. This is just kind of I don't know. I feel like this got some really, really crazy potential. I think flexibility-wise, I think this is something you totally could play in that Zombie Firehead deck to get even more value from destroying some of these cards. It is a targeted destroy. Something you could play in Nimrod as well. If you like Shuri Nimrod and then you play Fastball Special into the Nimrod, you're afflicting an enemy card here with negative 12 power. But that's like a crazy high roll. I think there's instances you destroy a card with 6 power. You destroy a card with 3 power. Like just destroying a card in general and being able to afflict that power onto an opponent's card, I think is really crazy. I think this might be the most competitive card of the season potentially, as it is data mined right now, so it's subject to change. But like, if this card, of course, is too strong, they might have to make this a 3 cost instead of a 2 cost, just because of it feels like a Venom-esque kind of situation where it's like the power is still getting maintained in a sense in that lane. Because while you are destroying that card, you're also afflicting an opponent with that negative power. So you lose that card, but you also still have that power essentially in that lane, just as negative afflicted power instead of it being a concurrent power on your side of the board. So I think that is really strong. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did make this something like a 3 cost if it is too strong, something like that, especially if it is an event card. I wouldn't be surprised if they change an event card that more people are going to have access to potentially, opposed to a card they have to spend more of their resources on. Which is why when we go to our rankings for this season, I do, of course, have Wade Wilson in last place. I think the ability is cool, being able to target a card to be able to, get from your deck or your hand that is a 1 cost and giving it extra power, getting Deadpool with a +1 to be able to do things later on and continue to, get that high roll going. I think it's probably kind of their thought process here. Or something, X23 with extra power is not bad, Agony with extra power, and then you play Deadpool into that lane, onto the Agony. Seems pretty cool to help, that Deadpool high roll. But I think it's the lowest card of the season. I then, of course, have Wild Child. Yes, 2-9 potential is really solid, or just at least a 2-5 is good. Of course, you do have to destroy or discard a card in order to have that ongoing power. But I do think Marrow is going to be edging that out a bit better because every time you destroy this or discard it, it is a 2-9 essentially. Of course, if you destroy this, you have to play extra energy in order to get that kind of value going. But if you discard it, like with a targeted discard potentially, getting that -6 just across the board is really solid. Being able to Morgan Le Fay to do it again, it seems really good, and I think that's probably like the style of deck you're playing here. It's a really solid affliction. Of course, it is not a targeted affliction. It is -6 spread across the board, but I still think that is going to be very solid for this card. And then, of course, I have Fastball Special number 1. I think this card is absolutely insane. I would not be surprised if this is one of the best cards of the season. And I think just the playability, it's not just completely just Nimrod things. I think you have other things like Fire Hair and stuff. Maybe even weird decks, like maybe a Misery kind of situation. You want to, destroy that in order to get value elsewhere. Combine this with Adamantium Infusion. Like, there's going to be so many different things I think you can do with this card. Which makes it pretty beneficial as more of a tech card instead of just a regular destroy card. Kind of something like a Killmonger, kind of like a destroy card, but also tech destroy card maybe you're using to help yourself and, negate your opponents are doing. Of course, that's what Killmonger is in general as a tech card. But this seems like even cooler than something like a Killmonger, of course. But yeah, that is going to be the gist of the new season. If you guys did enjoy the video, let me know down below what your guys' thoughts are on the brand new cards. Which ones do you guys think you're going to be picking up? And of course, we're going to have a buy or bust for the brand new season pass cards and for Chamber coming out within the next couple of days as well. So be on the lookout for that. And like I said, guys, if you guys did enjoy the video as well, definitely feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. It's been real. I will see you guys soon. God bless, and Tucker out.